The night they came for her, rough hands dragging her into the cold, Alicia realized the truth. She wasn't a daughter. She was a debt to be paid. If you believe in love so forbidden it burns, subscribe to Timeless Romance Tales and don't miss a single heartbeat of this story. The wind sliced through the corridors of Alicia's family estate like icy knives, and she shivered violently, wrapping her thin silk nightgown tighter around her body. She wasn't just cold, she was terrified. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to scream for someone, anyone, to save her. But the truth that had settled like a stone in her chest was undeniable. She was utterly alone. She had grown up believing she was just another daughter in a long line of heirs, unwanted but loved enough to survive. Yet now, in the deepest hours of the night, whispers she had tried to ignore came to life. Her family had sold her. Not metaphorically, literally. She was a debt to be paid, a commodity in a game she hadn't even realized she was part of. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door to her room burst open. Rough hands grabbed her arms, their grip unyielding, and dragged her backward. The silk of her gown caught and ripped slightly, and a shiver of fear and something else, a heat she didn't understand, raced through her. "You're coming with us," a deep, commanding voice said. It left no room for protest, no flicker of compassion. Alicia struggled, kicking and pulling, but the hands on her were relentless. Her pulse thundered, her stomach twisting with terror, humiliation, and something that bordered on curiosity. Outside, the night air hit her like a physical blow. Cold, sharp, and merciless, it burned her skin as she stumbled along the cobblestones, bare feet numb with shock. A black carriage waited silently, its wheels barely making a sound on the ground. The men who had taken her pushed her forward like she weighed nothing at all. Alicia's heart raced. The world she had known, her family, her home, the life she thought she had was gone. All that remained was the icy truth and the powerful presence waiting for her at the carriage. He was impossibly tall, impossibly commanding, and he didn't move. His wolf gold eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Dangerous. Dominant. Terrifying. And yet, her body reacted before her mind could protest. Every nerve ending screamed in response to him, even as fear clawed at her throat. "Mine," he said. One word. Low, deliberate, possessing. The syllable wrapped around her chest like a vice, making her shiver. Not entirely from the cold. The men shoved her into the carriage. She stumbled to the seat, heart racing, skin hypersensitive, gown clinging to her like a second skin. She could feel his gaze burning into her from the doorway, heavy, intimate, impossible to ignore. "Do you understand what's happening?" one of the men demanded. Alicia shook her head. Words caught in her throat. How could she explain that she didn't want to be here, that every glance from him made her stomach twist, that she wanted both to run and to lean into him? "You will," the man said, dismissing her, leaving her alone with the weight of Cale's presence. The carriage moved silently, every bump and sway a reminder of her vulnerability. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to protect her exposed skin and failing spectacularly. Her pulse raced, her mind spinning between terror and the undeniable, dangerous curiosity ignited by the man whose gaze burned her alive. When they arrived, the grand doors of Cale's hall swung open, revealing a room that stole her breath. Crystal chandeliers hung from impossibly high ceilings, reflecting candlelight in 1,000 fragmented beams. The scent of incense and leather filled the air, intoxicating, almost suffocating. And at the center of it all, waiting, was him. Cale. He didn't move as she entered. He didn't need to. The power in his presence demanded attention, and she felt it deep in her chest, a pressure that made her pulse quicken and her legs weak. Wolf gold eyes followed her every movement, measuring, claiming, igniting attention she couldn't name. "Step forward," he said, smooth and controlled, a growl hidden beneath the surface. His voice was velvet and steel. Every instinct in her screamed to stay away, to resist, but her legs obeyed him before she could even think. As she drew closer, He lifted his hand and brushed lightly under her chin. Just a touch. But it was electric, setting every nerve ending alight. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. The fear that had ruled her minutes before twisted into a heady mixture of terror and something darker, something forbidden. "You belong to me now, body and soul," he whispered. The words weren't a command. They were a brand. She could feel it sear into her, mark her in a way that was invisible yet undeniable. Alicia's stomach lurched. Her mind screamed. Her body betrayed her. She wanted to run, to fight, to pull away. But even as she trembled, a shiver of anticipation ran down her spine. She could feel the pull of him, the invisible thread that tethered her to his gaze, to his dominance, to the dangerous promise of what was to come. The courtiers and servants in the room dared not breathe, their silence amplifying the tension between them. The air itself seemed to warp around him, heavy with power, desire, and something she couldn't yet name. Every glance he gave her, every fraction of a movement, was a claim, and she was helpless to resist. Kale leaned slightly closer. She caught the faint scent of him, a raw, musky heat that made her pulse quicken. He didn't need to touch her again. His presence alone made her skin alive, every inch of her aching with an electric, dangerous curiosity. "Mine," he repeated, soft this time, almost intimate, almost feral. Her knees weakened. Her throat went dry. Fear and fascination collided in her mind, twisting into a tension that made it impossible to think, impossible to breathe. Every part of her body reacted to him, the tiniest brush of air, the smallest tilt of his head, and though she hated herself for it, she couldn't deny the thrill it brought. She was frightened. She was humiliated. She was owned. And she had only just arrived. He straightened, his golden gaze never leaving hers. Every inch of him radiated power, danger, and a promise that terrified and thrilled her at the same time. Alicia understood, with a clarity that made her stomach twist and her chest ache. She was no longer just a daughter, no longer safe. She was a possession. She was a prize. And she had been claimed. Her mind swirled with thoughts, fears, and a dangerous fascination she wasn't ready to name. The reality of her situation crashed into her, leaving her dizzy and trembling. She had no idea what awaited her, only that from this moment on, her life belonged to him, entirely, utterly body and soul. Kale lifted her chin again, eyes blazing, and whispered, "You belong to me now, body and soul." He didn't just buy her. He marked her with a single touch that set her blood on fire. The moment Alicia stepped into the grand hall, every eye in the room found her. The walls, gilded in gold, reflected the light from towering chandeliers, casting fractured beams across the polished marble floor. The noble court had gathered in their finest attire, waiting, watching. Alicia felt like a specimen under a microscope, her delicate silk gown clinging to her trembling form. The cold draft of the hall kissed her bare arms and shoulders, sending shivers down her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it was useless. The heat that surged through her body wasn't just from the chill. Kale stood at the center, immovable, commanding. Every inch of him radiated power and dominance. His wolf golden eyes fixed on her, and it felt like the room disappeared, leaving only the two of them suspended in an invisible, electric field. She felt the pull of him even before he moved, a tether tightening with every heartbeat. Her stomach knotted with fear, and yet, something darker, more dangerous, stirred inside her, a wild curiosity she couldn't resist. The court fell into an uneasy silence as Kale stepped forward. He extended a hand, brushing his fingers along her waist. The gesture was subtle, almost casual, yet it ignited a fire in Alicia that she couldn't control. Her pulse surged, breath catching in her throat, every nerve alive to the heat of his touch. She wanted to retreat, to hide, to claim some shred of dignity, but the pull toward him, toward the impossible allure of his dominance, rooted her in place. "She is mine," Kale's voice boomed, low, commanding, cutting through the hall like a knife. The gasps echoed, Whispered conversations stopped mid-word, and the courtiers froze. Some stared in disbelief, others in awe. A few, unable to contain their scorn, murmured judgments under their breath. "She's barren," a noblewoman whispered, loud enough for the nearby courtiers to hear. "How could he claim her? She cannot produce an heir." Cale's eyes snapped toward the speaker, a growl rumbling from deep within his chest. It vibrated through the marble floor and into Alicia, making her shiver involuntarily. The growl wasn't just a warning. It was a mark of possession, a primal declaration that silenced the room. Every eye darted away, trembling at the weight of his presence. "Silence," he commanded, each word a whip crack in the tense air. "She is my mate. You will speak her name only with respect, or not at all." Alicia felt heat creeping up her neck, spreading across her cheeks and chest. Every gaze pressed upon her felt like nothing compared to the fire he ignited simply by holding her close. She wanted to pull away, to hide from the intensity, yet every instinct in her body betrayed her, leaning subtly toward him, craving the warmth, the claim, the impossible allure of his dominance. Cale's fingers tightened at her waist, possessive, deliberate. The faint pressure sent jolts through her body, a dangerous ache she did not understand. She could feel the eyes of the court burning into her, yet she was entirely aware only of him, his golden gaze, his predatory stance, the quiet, intoxicating power that tethered her to him like a living chain. "From this night forward, you are mine alone," he whispered, his lips near her ear, voice low, intimate, and vibrating with unspoken threat. Alicia's pulse raced. Her knees threatened to buckle. Her chest tightened. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever felt, a combination of fear, awe, and forbidden longing that made her want to cry, scream, and lean into him all at once. The courtiers dared not breathe. Even the boldest noblemen and women shrank under Cale's dominance. Alicia felt their judgment, their whispers, their disbelief, yet none of it mattered. She was wrapped in his presence, claimed and marked. Her body responded in ways that both terrified and fascinated her. The heat curling in her stomach, the tension coiling along her spine, the rapid thrum of her pulse, it all screamed that she had no control, and yet she could not tear herself from him. A murmur spread among the court about her infertility, their voices like knives slicing at her chest. Cale's eyes cut toward them, a flash of gold lighting up with unrestrained ferocity. A low growl rolled from his throat, silencing them instantly. "Her worth is not measured by your shallow minds," he said, voice sharp and authoritative. "She is my mate. She is my claim. And her place is by my side, not dictated by your petty judgments." Alicia's chest heaved. She could feel the rhythm of her own pulse against the press of his hand, the brush of his fingers along her skin sending shivers down her spine. She wanted to recoil, to reject the heat, the claim, the dominance, but she could not. Every instinct drew her closer. Every nerve screamed to surrender, to lean into the tension that wrapped around them both. Cale tilted his head, golden eyes softening just slightly. His thumb traced a delicate line along her hip, and she shivered, the sensation flaring through her chest and down to the tips of her fingers. The warmth, the possession, the undeniable dominance of him made her ache with longing, though she barely understood what it meant. She realized she was aware of every subtle motion, every breath, every heartbeat, hers and his, and that awareness was intoxicating. He leaned closer, so close that she could feel the heat of his breath against her ear. "From this night on, you belong to me," he whispered, voice vibrating in ways that made her heart thunder. "No one may touch you, speak to you, or breathe your name without my permission." Alicia felt her knees weaken. Her pulse raced uncontrollably, heat pooling in her stomach, tingling in ways that left her dizzy. She wanted to protest, to flee, to reclaim some fragment of control, but her body, traitorous and alive, trembled under his attention, responding to his dominance in ways she had never experienced. The whispers of the court tried again, soft now, cautious, as if testing the limits of his authority. "She cannot give him an heir. What use is she?" Kale's golden eyes flicked to them, a feral edge glinting in the light. A growl deep and low rumbled from his chest, shaking the room. "Her worth is mine to define," he said, voice like iron. "And you will respect it, or face consequences you are not prepared for." Alicia's heart raced in tandem with the heat burning through her chest. Every fiber of her body was alive to him, to the intensity, the unyielding dominance, the dangerous, impossible attraction that tethered her to him. She wanted to pull away, and yet she could not. She was aware of every breath, every brush of his hand, every golden gleam in his eyes, and she felt herself unravel in his presence. Kale leaned closer still, lips brushing just above her ear. "From this night on," he murmured, growling softly, "you are mine alone." The words sent a shiver through her, her stomach knotting and pulse hammering. The entire hall, the judgmental whispers, the cold marble beneath her feet, faded away. There was only him, claiming her, marking her, consuming her attention and her thoughts completely. She realized, with a rush of terror and thrilling exhilaration, that she was utterly his. Her body, her mind, her pulse, every fleeting thought was wrapped up in him. The court may have judged, whispered, and doubted, but it no longer mattered. She was his, entirely, and the claim he had placed on her was unbreakable. Kale's fingers pressed possessively into her waist, golden eyes blazing as he leaned closer, lips brushing her ear. "From this night on, you are mine alone," he growled, leaving her trembling in the intensity of his claim. Every time his lips hovered near hers, she swore she could feel his heartbeat inside her own body. The hall had emptied of most nobles, leaving only the quiet hum of servants moving about, dust motes drifting lazily in the fading candlelight. Alicia stood near the ornate balcony, the cool evening breeze brushing against her exposed shoulders, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens below. Her heart still thudded violently from the public claim Kale had made just hours ago. Every whisper, every sneer from the court echoed in her mind, but none of it mattered anymore. All that existed was the presence of the man who had staked a claim on her, not as a mere possession, but as something infinitely more intimate, something terrifyingly consuming. Kale emerged from the shadows, silent and impossibly graceful, the long line of his coat brushing the floor. His golden eyes caught hers immediately, burning into her soul with that same intensity that had left her trembling in the grand hall. Without a word, he closed the distance between them, and Alicia felt the familiar pull in her chest, the magnetic tug she could neither resist nor fully understand. He reached for her, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch was delicate, slow, deliberate, yet it ignited a fire she couldn't control. Her pulse spiked, every nerve in her body alive to the sensation. The warmth of his hand against her cheek, the featherlight sweep of his thumb along her jawline, left her breathless, and she swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "You're trembling," Kale murmured, voice low and husky, each word vibrating straight into her chest. His other hand pressed gently against her waist, his palm warm, firm, and utterly possessive. The closeness, the heat radiating from him, made her ache in ways that terrified her. I'm fine," she stammered, even though her pulse betrayed her. She wanted to pull back, to regain some control, but her body betrayed her, leaning subtly toward him, drawn like a moth to the irresistible flame of his presence. Kale didn't release her. Instead, he leaned closer, brushing his lips near her ear, his warm breath sending shivers down her spine. "Every time I touch you," he whispered, voice low and dangerous, "I feel it too, the pull between us, the heat we cannot deny." Alicia's knees weakened slightly, and she gripped the balcony railing for support. Her chest heaved, a storm of emotions raging inside her, fear, desire, awe, and an ache she could not name. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and utterly consuming. She wanted to resist, to run, to hide from the intensity, but another part of her, a part that had never existed before, wanted to lean into him, to feel the brush of his fingers, the press of his palm, the warmth of his golden gaze. As if reading her mind, Kale's fingers lingered at the curve of her waist, tracing the line of her side, light enough to make her skin tingle, yet deliberate enough to leave no doubt that she was his. The magnetic pull between them was undeniable, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in her chest. Her breath hitched as his eyes softened slightly, just enough to unsettle her, stirring a forbidden longing she could not name. Alicia tried to pull away, but Kale's hand moved with her, guiding her gently, asserting his possession in a way that was both intimate and consuming. "Do you feel it too?" he asked, his lips barely brushing the shell of her ear. "This dangerous desire that exists between us?" She swallowed hard, voice trembling. I don't know." Kale's golden gaze held hers, unyielding, magnetic. "You do," he murmured. "You feel it every time I touch you. Every time I look at you. Every time I exist in the same space as you." The words made her shiver, her skin practically humming with awareness. Every subtle motion, every lingering touch, made her ache in ways she could neither understand nor resist. The fire of forbidden desire clashed violently with her fear of being unworthy. She was painfully aware of the whispers of the court, the judgment, the cruel sneers about her infertility, but in this moment, none of that mattered. Kale's claim, his dominance, his presence, overwhelmed everything. As if summoned by the tension, a soft, haughty laugh echoed from the shadows. Alicia's head snapped toward the source, and her heart sank. A she-wolf, lithe and dangerous, stepped into view, her eyes sharp and calculating. She had always been jealous of the attention Alicia received, of the power she seemed to wield simply by being near Kale. And now, sensing the danger of this closeness, she was determined to expose her. "You're trembling, little mate," the she-wolf sneered, voice dripping with malice. "Perhaps it's more than fear that keeps you so weak. Perhaps your secret, your inability to give him an heir, will finally be exposed." Alicia's stomach twisted. The words cut deeper than any blow could. She had never felt more vulnerable, more exposed. Every ounce of her being wanted to flee, to hide, to escape the threat, yet she couldn't tear herself away from Kale, whose presence was a tether she could not resist. Kale's gaze snapped to the she-wolf, sharp and golden, and a growl rumbled low from his chest, vibrating through the air. His hand tightened possessively around Alicia's waist, asserting ownership in the most primal way. The she-wolf faltered, realizing that her threat was meaningless against the power of his claim. "Do not speak of her," Kale said, voice low, deadly, and full of authority. "She is mine. Every thought, every heartbeat, every breath she takes belongs to me. And if you attempt to harm her, you will answer to me." Alicia's chest heaved. The storm of emotions inside her intensified: fear, desire, awe, shame, and a forbidden longing that left her trembling. She wanted to pull back, to regain control, but the fire he ignited in her was too strong, too consuming. Every nerve ending, every pulse of her heartbeat was alive to him, to his dominance, to the dangerous desire that crackled between them like electricity. Kale leaned closer, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear again, lingering just enough to make her shiver. His golden eyes softened slightly, and yet there was a feral edge beneath the surface, a promise, a threat, an unspoken desire that made her ache in ways she didn't understand. "You must learn," he whispered, voice husky and intimate, "to feel without fear, to exist with me without running. This desire, it's ours, whether you admit it or not." Alicia swallowed hard, trembling under the intensity. Every glance, every subtle brush of his hand, every golden flicker of his eyes made her ache. She wanted to pull back, to flee, yet she could not. She was tethered to him, caught in a web of magnetic desire, fear, and awe that left her breathless and trembling. Hours passed, though time felt suspended, as Kale's touches lingered, deliberate and intimate. He brushed her hair, pressed his palm to her racing pulse, and whispered words that made her shiver, twisting her insides with forbidden longing. Every movement, every subtle gesture, was a claim, A mark, a possession that left her helpless and aware of the fire building between them. And then, as she turned to glance at the fading light beyond the balcony, she caught a shadowed figure moving silently through the hall. Curiosity and fear intertwined as she strained to hear, and then she froze. Cale's husky voice, low and filled with a dangerous, unreadable tone, carried across the quiet space. "She can never know the truth about what I am." Alicia's heart froze. The words burned into her mind, leaving her trembling with fear and curiosity. What did he mean? What secret lay hidden beneath the dominance, the golden eyes, and the ferocious claim he had laid on her? Every nerve in her body hummed with tension, desire, and a dangerous, unspoken fear. She had no answers, only questions, and the realization that her life, her heart, and every pulse of her being were entwined irrevocably with Cale's. Alicia's pulse thundered in her ears as Cale's voice echoed in her mind. "She can never know the truth about what I am." The words lingered, a promise of danger, desire, and secrets yet to be revealed. She thought she was the only one hiding something, but the secret he carried could burn the entire kingdom to ash. The castle had never seemed more suffocating. The walls, tall and grand, were lined with tapestries depicting generations of Cale's ancestors, each one a reminder of the weight of his legacy. Alicia walked beside him through the shadowed corridors, her silk gown whispering softly against the polished floors. Her heart still throbbed from the events of the evening before, the lingering touches, the magnetic pull, the forbidden ache that thrummed between them. Cale's presence was a constant force, an invisible tether that bound her to him. She could feel the subtle heat of his body even when he wasn't directly beside her. Every movement he made radiated dominance, yet there was a tremor beneath the surface, a tension he struggled to conceal. It made her pulse quicken, not with fear this time, but with an impossible curiosity. "I feel it," she whispered, almost to herself, as they entered a private chamber. "There's something beneath you. What is it?" Cale's golden eyes darkened, a shadow flickering across them. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the door behind them, sealing the room from the prying eyes of the court. The moment the latch clicked, the air shifted, charged, electric, dangerous. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the subtle tremble in his hands. "You shouldn't know yet," he murmured, his voice low, carrying a weight that pressed against her chest. "Some truths are dangerous. Even for you." Alicia's breath caught. She had always known Cale was more than a man, more than an alpha king. But this uncertainty, the unspoken fragility beneath his dominance, intrigued her more than it frightened her. "I can handle it," she said softly, though even as the words left her lips, doubt tugged at her. Cale's gaze flickered, almost vulnerable, before hardening into his usual, predatory intensity. He reached out, his hand brushing against her cheek, and she shivered under the warmth of his touch. His fingers trailed down to her shoulder, lingering on her bare skin, sending shivers that made her chest ache. The proximity, the almost imperceptible quiver in his movements, set her nerves alight. "You feel it too," he whispered, leaning closer, so close that she could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of him, warm, musky, commanding. "The pull between us, the tension that threatens to consume everything if I let it." Alicia's hands trembled slightly as she reached for his wrist, needing to steady herself. Her pulse was frantic, every nerve on fire. She was acutely aware of the heat radiating from him, the way his golden eyes studied her with an intensity that left her breathless. Her body, despite the fear, responded in ways she didn't understand, leaning toward him in spite of the warning bells in her mind. Cale's hand shifted to her waist, firm and possessive, pressing her closer. The strength in his grip was undeniable, and yet there was a vulnerability in the tremor of his fingers, a crack in the armor of dominance he always wore. Alicia's breath hitched. Every brush of his palm, every subtle caress, every flicker of his eyes made her ache with longing she didn't dare name. "You are dangerous to me," he admitted, voice husky, carrying a rare, vulnerable edge. Not because of your body, not because of the court, but because of how easily you ignite something in me I cannot control. Alicia swallowed, chest tight with emotion. Cale, she whispered, but he silenced her with a soft, deliberate tilt of his head. He leaned even closer, their faces inches apart, the almost touch of lips sending sparks through the space between them. The tension was unbearable, every second stretching like a taut string ready to snap. She could feel his pulse, rapid and steady beneath his skin, almost in sync with her own. Every inch of her body was alive to him, to his power, his dominance, and the terrifying vulnerability that he barely allowed himself to show. "You feel it too," he murmured again, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, curling slightly into her gown, as if to anchor both of them in the moment. The desire, the danger. "It isn't just yours. It's mine as well." Alicia's heart raced uncontrollably. She wanted to pull away, to escape the intensity, yet she couldn't. She leaned subtly toward him, and his eyes darkened with possessive hunger. His hands fisted the fabric of her gown, drawing her impossibly closer. She could feel the strength in his hold, the fire in his gaze, and a storm of forbidden longing that left her trembling and breathless. A soft noise from outside the chamber startled them. Cale immediately shifted, his posture alert, a predator on edge. Alicia caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Fear. Not for himself, but for what he might do, what he might lose control of. The revelation struck her, the hidden fragility beneath his dominance, and her heart ached in sympathy, even as desire flared hotter within her. "You're afraid," she murmured, her fingers brushing against his hand. Afraid of losing control? Cale's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, his golden eyes shimmered with raw vulnerability. Then, with a shiver that ran through both of them, he leaned closer, pressing his forehead to hers. His voice was a low growl, vibrating with emotion. "I am dangerous," he admitted. "To you, to everyone around me. And yet, I cannot resist you." Alicia's pulse hammered. The words struck her harder than any kiss could. She reached up, almost instinctively, touching his face, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the warmth of his skin. Every brush of their fingers, every heartbeat, every almost touch of lips was a perilous thrill, a spark threatening to ignite a fire she wasn't prepared for. Hours seemed to pass in the quiet intensity of that chamber. Their bodies hovered close, every subtle brush, every lingering touch, every unspoken word feeding the growing tension between them. Cale's hands wandered, possessive yet careful, brushing against her shoulders, tracing the curve of her waist, pressing against her racing pulse. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and yet dangerous, filled with a tension that neither of them could fully resist. Outside, the court carried on with preparations for the upcoming ceremony, unaware of the storm of desire and fear raging just behind the closed doors. But even as Alicia's thoughts swirled with longing and apprehension, she couldn't ignore the subtle glances of the jealous she-wolf lurking nearby. Her presence was a constant, simmering threat, a reminder that Alicia's vulnerability, her secrets, were never far from exposure. Cale sensed it too, and his grip on her tightened slightly, possessive and protective. "No one touches you," he murmured, voice husky with barely contained emotion. "No one dares to, not while I am here." Alicia's chest heaved with the intensity of it all. She could feel the chemistry building, a tension that was almost unbearable. Every brush of his fingers, every almost kiss, every possessive glance sent shivers down her spine, leaving her simultaneously terrified and aching. Her body, mind, and heart were entwined with his in ways she couldn't comprehend, yet the danger, the forbidden nature of it, made it impossible to resist. Finally, the time for the ceremony arrived. The great hall was filled with nobles, courtiers, and advisors. The chandeliers blazed, casting brilliant light over the marble floors. Alicia's pulse raced as Cale led her forward, his hand firm at her waist, golden eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. Every step, every glance, Every subtle shift of his hand was a declaration, a mark, a warning that she was his and his alone. And then, in the midst of the ceremony, Cale's control gave way for a fleeting moment. He pressed her against him, lips claiming hers in a deep, searing kiss, public yet intimate, dangerous yet consuming. Gasps echoed throughout the hall, whispers froze mid-sentence, and every gaze turned to them. Alicia's mind went blank, her pulse racing, body trembling with the overwhelming heat of their proximity. The kiss lingered, a declaration, a claim, a spark that threatened to ignite everything around them. Her heart hammered against her ribs, breath catching in her throat. Every nerve was alive to him, the tremor in his hands, the possessive press of his body, the heat of his gaze, and she realized, with a heady mixture of fear and desire, that nothing could sever the tether between them now. The crowd's whispers, the court's astonishment, and the world outside faded to nothing as Cale's lips pressed against hers again, and Alicia's heartbeat matched his in an almost unbearable rhythm, leaving the secret of his curse still unspoken, burning silently beneath the surface. His kiss didn't just claim her lips, they branded her heart forever. The grand hall was heavy with anticipation. Every noble and courtier had assembled for the evening ceremony, their gowns and robes glittering beneath the chandeliers, the air thick with murmurs and the scent of wax and perfume. Alicia's pulse raced as she followed Cale down the polished marble aisle, the weight of his golden gaze pressing against her even as whispers swirled around them. Every step she took reminded her that she belonged to him now, body and soul, and that the court's scrutiny could do nothing to sever the invisible tether that held her to the Alpha King. Cale's hand rested possessively on her waist, fingers curving around her so deliberately that every brush of his touch sent jolts through her body. She felt simultaneously terrified and intoxicated. The air between them was charged, crackling with tension and desire, and she couldn't help but lean subtly toward him, drawn by the magnetic pull that had haunted her every moment since he claimed her. As they reached the center of the hall, Cale stopped abruptly. Every eye in the room was on them now, a mixture of shock, awe, and scandal frozen on the faces of courtiers who had whispered about her infertility and questioned her worth just days before. He cupped her face with one hand, golden eyes searing into hers, and Alicia's breath caught in her throat. The world narrowed to nothing but the press of his body, the strength of his hold, and the heat that ignited wherever he touched her. Then he leaned in. The kiss was instantaneous, electric and all-consuming. Fiery and possessive, it pressed her back against his chest, his body a wall of heat and dominance she could neither resist nor escape. Gasps rippled through the hall, whispers stopping mid-word as every courtier realized what was happening. This was no casual kiss. It was a public, dangerous declaration. He was marking her, claiming her in front of everyone, and the effect it had on her body was undeniable. Alicia's hands shook as they rested against his chest, her fingers gripping the fabric of his coat almost desperately. Her body trembled, heat pooling in her stomach, a thrill of forbidden desire running through her veins. She had never felt so exposed, yet so entirely alive. Each pulse of her heartbeat matched the rhythm of his, a dangerous, magnetic dance that left her dizzy, breathless, and aching with longing. Every subtle press of his lips, every slight tilt of his head, every lingering touch along her jawline and neck ignited a fire she couldn't name. She wanted to pull away, to reclaim some sense of control, but each movement drew her closer to him instead. She was tethered to him, marked by a heat that neither fear nor judgment could extinguish. Cale's hands moved with deliberate possessiveness, brushing her hair back, pressing her closer and curling slightly into her gown at the hips. Alicia's chest heaved as the sensation built, the tension so thick she could almost taste it. She was aware of every whispered reaction from the courtiers, the shock, the envy, the awe, but the only thing she could focus on was the rhythm of his body against hers, the raw, magnetic connection that left her trembling in ways she had never imagined possible. When the kiss broke, even briefly, Cale's forehead rested against hers. Golden eyes burned into hers, soft yet feral, commanding yet intimate. Do you feel it? He whispered, low and husky, voice vibrating through her entire being. This fire, this danger, it's ours. It has always been ours. Alicia's lips parted, words caught in her throat. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, desire, and awe. She wanted to speak, to protest, to question, yet every instinct in her body was screaming that she belonged here, under his gaze, pressed against him, ignited by his possession. The murmurs of the court resumed, more cautious now, as though the noble observers realized they were intruding on a private world they weren't meant to witness. Whispers of her infertility floated through the air again, but they no longer carried the weight they once had. Cale's golden gaze swept the room, feral and commanding, and the nobles fell silent once more. Her worth is mine to define, he said sharply, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. Her body, her mind, her heart, every part belongs to me. Respect that, or face consequences you are unprepared for. Alicia's chest tightened with a combination of fear and awe. The court's judgment, the whispers, the envy. They could not touch her. She was his, marked, claimed, and branded by the fiery dominance that radiated from every inch of his presence. And yet, beneath that fire, she felt the undercurrent of vulnerability, the tremor that hinted at secrets he kept even from her. As the ceremony drew to a close, Alicia's attention was drawn to the shadowed corners of the hall. She noticed small groups of courtiers exchanging hurried, hushed words, glances darting toward Cale and her with malicious intent. Her stomach churned as the pieces clicked together. Political enemies were plotting, waiting for any weakness to strike. Her infertility, the whispered judgments, the jealousy. These were weapons they intended to use against Cale and her, and she could feel the danger tightening around them like a vice. Later, as the candles burned low and the hall emptied, Alicia lingered near the balcony, hidden from view. The cool night air brushed her exposed arms, but it did little to calm the storm raging inside her. From the shadows of the corridor, hushed voices reached her ears. She strained to listen, her pulse quickening with each syllable. The full moon, one voice whispered. Cale must be taken before he can solidify his claim. The mate, use her weakness to reach him. Alicia's stomach dropped. An assassination plot. Against Cale. And it was scheduled for the next full moon. Fear clenched at her chest, but it was laced with determination. She could not let this happen. Not to him. Not to them. She was his now, and she would do whatever it took to protect him. Her trembling hands gripped the balcony railing as her mind raced, heart hammering in her chest. The kiss, the fire, the public claim, all of it suddenly felt like both a gift and a warning. Desire had marked her, yes, but danger followed closely behind. And as she looked toward the moonlit sky, she knew the next full moon would be the moment when everything could change forever. Alicia's breath hitched as the whispered plot sank into her mind. She had to warn him, but could she stop what was coming in time? The night of the full moon wasn't just about power. It was about survival. The moon hung low and full over the kingdom, casting silver light across the grand courtyard. The full moon celebration, a centuries-old tradition, had transformed the space into a glittering spectacle, long tables lined with golden candles, banners fluttering in the wind, and nobles adorned in shimmering gowns and dark suits of intricate embroidery. Music floated in the air, a haunting melody that mingled with laughter, chatter, and the occasional clink of goblets. Yet beneath the grandeur, Alicia felt a gnawing sense of dread twisting in her stomach. She had overheard the whispers in the shadows after the last ceremony, the plot, the full moon, the assassination plan against Cale. Each word replayed in her mind like a warning she couldn't ignore. Every noble smile now seemed tainted with hidden knives, every polite bow, a potential trap. Her chest tightened as she sought Cale out amidst the crowd. "Cale," she murmured, catching his attention as he stood near the high dais, surveying the gathering with his usual golden intensity. "You need to listen to me. There's danger tonight. Someone's planning to." He cut her off, a wry, dismissive smile playing across his lips. "Danger?" "Alicia, This is a celebration, not a battlefield. Surely you don't believe whispers and shadows have the power to touch me here. She felt a flicker of frustration, but more than that, fear. Kale, please. I overheard them. It's not just whispers. They plan to strike. Tonight, during the celebration. For a fleeting second, his eyes softened, and she thought perhaps he would listen. But the flicker was gone almost instantly, replaced by the predatory dominance that made her knees weak. If they dare, he said softly, almost to himself, they will regret it. I am not so easily caught off guard. Alicia's hands trembled at his confidence, a mix of awe and desperation flooding her. But Kale. He brushed her words aside, leaning close, his lips hovering near her ear. Alicia, you worry too much. The full moon is powerful, yes, but so am I, trust me. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to that unshakable aura of strength he always radiated. And yet, deep inside, a primal warning screamed that she couldn't ignore. Her pulse raced, heart hammering with a dangerous mixture of desire, fear, and urgency. As the ceremony began, the crowd's attention focused on the ceremonial rites, oblivious to the storm brewing in the shadows. Alicia's gaze remained fixed on the corridors leading into the courtyard, every shadow a potential threat. She felt Kale's hand slide possessively along her waist, grounding her, yet she could sense the subtle tremor beneath his confidence, the hint of a vulnerability he kept buried beneath the mask of dominance. Suddenly, movement flickered at the edge of her vision. Two cloaked figures darted from the shadows, daggers glinting under the moonlight. The crowd hadn't noticed them yet, caught in the rapture of music and dance, laughter and ritual. But Alicia's instinct screamed, danger, death. Kale, she yelled, tugging at his sleeve. His golden eyes snapped to hers, now widened in alarm as he followed her gaze. Time seemed to stretch, the world slowing as the assassins lunged through the crowd. The first blade swung toward Alicia, who froze, heart pounding, unable to process the speed of the attack. Kale reacted in a heartbeat, moving with lethal precision. His body collided with hers, absorbing the force of the strike meant for her. A searing pain tore through his side as the blade sank into him, but he didn't falter. Instead, he pressed her behind him, shielding her from further attacks with his own body. The golden glow in his eyes flared, raw and feral, as if the very alpha within him had awakened to protect what was his. Alicia gasped, pressing herself closer to him, her trembling hands against his chest. His blood seeped through his tunic, staining her fingers as she instinctively tried to steady him. The reality hit her in a terrifying wave. Kale was hurt, and all because she had overheard the threat too late. He growled low in his chest, a sound that reverberated through her very bones, and then, voice hoarse but commanding, he whispered fiercely, "Run, Alicia, before they take you too." Her mouth opened to protest, to refuse, to argue that she would not leave him. But the look in his golden eyes, torn between feral dominance and unyielding protection, left her silent. He would not survive this if she stayed in the open. She had to obey, if only to see him live, to see him hold her again. Around them, chaos erupted. Assassins struck at guards, nobles screamed and ducked for cover, and the once celebratory courtyard became a battlefield of shadows, moonlight, and flashing steel. Kale's presence was magnetic, feral, and commanding, even as blood stained his chest. Each movement of his was precise, a deadly dance of survival and dominance, keeping her safe as he struck down attacker after attacker with lethal grace. Alicia's mind raced, panic battling against the heat of desire that still lingered from every past touch, every lingering gaze. She could not forget how he had claimed her, kissed her, made her tremble and ache with longing. And now, seeing him in danger, bleeding, raw and vulnerable yet unstoppable, twisted that desire into something fiercer, more urgent. One of the assassins lunged at her from the side, and she barely had time to step back. Kale intercepted, his bloodied hand catching the wrist of the attacker and twisting with brutal precision. the dagger clattering harmlessly to the ground. He pressed a finger to her lips, a silent command. Trust him. I can't leave you, Alicia whispered, fear and helplessness choking her voice. You must, he growled, eyes blazing gold. Live, Alicia. Survive. Then you can fight with me, but now run. Her chest heaved as she obeyed, taking hesitant steps away from him, heart aching as she looked back. The golden glow of his eyes never wavered, never faltered, even as he fended off another attacker. His lips, bloodied and set in a hard line, were all she could think about. How close they had been, how possessive, how dangerous, how utterly his. The full moon bathed the courtyard in silver light, casting long shadows over the chaos. Guards had begun to rally, but the assassins moved with lethal intent, aware of the danger and willing to take their lives to strike the Alpha King. Alicia's mind was a storm of panic, fear, and longing. She ran along the edges of the courtyard, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to protect him, yet obeying his command. Cale's roar echoed through the courtyard as he threw himself between her and another assassin, golden eyes blazing with a fire she had never seen before. His bloodied chest rose and fell rapidly, but his dominance, his presence, his claim over her and the world around him remained unbroken. Even wounded, he was unstoppable, a force of nature she could neither resist nor leave behind. And yet, the threat was real. His blood soaked her hands when she had touched him to steady his fall, the warmth and metallic tang igniting a thrill she couldn't name. Desire, fear, and desperation intertwined, leaving her trembling with adrenaline and longing. She had to survive. She had to obey. She had to live to see him again. With one last look at him, golden eyes burning into hers, she bolted into the shadows, weaving through the chaos, heart hammering. The roar of the Alpha echoed behind her, a terrifying promise and a magnetic pull she couldn't escape. Bleeding, feral, and commanding, Cale growled over the din of chaos. Run, Alicia, before they take you too. She ran through the forest barefoot, heart pounding, not just from fear, but from the memory of his last touch. The blood moon hung low in the sky, casting a crimson glow across the dense forest. Alicia's bare feet slapped against the cold earth, roots and stones biting at her skin, but she didn't slow. Her dress, torn from the chaos of the courtyard, trailed behind her like tattered wings. Her hair, wild and tangled, whipped across her face as she fled, every nerve screaming in fear and anticipation. Her pulse wasn't just racing from the pursuit. It was the lingering memory of Cale's last touch, the way his golden hands had pressed her against him, the warmth of his body and the intensity of his claim. Branches clawed at her arms, leaves stuck to the sweat and dirt on her skin, but she kept running, lungs burning, heart hammering. Every shadow seemed to hold danger. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, a snapping branch, made her flinch. The forest was alive with predators tonight, and she wasn't sure if it was just the assassins or something far older and darker. Her mind flashed back to the moment Cale had told her to run, his golden eyes blazing with feral protection, his voice low and commanding. Run, Alicia, before they take you too. She had obeyed, driven by fear, and yet every step she took away from him felt like tearing a piece of herself from her chest. And then, the past came crashing back, sharp, painful, unbidden. She remembered the orphanage, the cold nights when her small hands had curled around nothing but the thin blanket she shared with a dozen other children. She remembered the cruelty of caretakers who had sneered at her, told her she was worthless because she had no family, no name, no claim to love or warmth. Her father's absence had been a wound too deep to name. Her mother's death had left her fragile, and the foster homes that followed had been no kinder, filled with greed, manipulation, and exploitation. She had learned young that love was either a lie or a trap. Trust, she had concluded, was for fools. And yet, here she was, trembling and running through the forest, aching for the touch of the man who had claimed her, who had marked her in ways she had never imagined. That touch, possessive, commanding and yet fragile beneath the dominance, haunted her even in the shadows. It was terrifying, intoxicating, and dangerously real. Her flight was abruptly halted by a figure stepping from between the trees. Broad-shouldered, tall, and predatory, the rival alpha blocked her path. His eyes glinted under the crimson light, sharp and cruel. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered. The little mate of the Alpha King, fleeing like a frightened rabbit. Alicia's stomach sank. She knew she couldn't outrun him. Not alone, not now. She tried to sidestep, to duck past him, but his presence was overwhelming. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward him, and she stumbled, breath catching painfully in her throat. "You're far from the court now," he taunted, his lips curling into a smile that made her skin crawl. "No one will come for you out here. And everyone knows you cannot bear. You're useless to him. A mate who cannot give him an heir is nothing." The words stabbed her deeper than the fear ever could. Every flash of shame from the court, every whisper about her infertility, every cruel look was resurrected in that moment. She wanted to scream, to fight, to tear herself from his grasp, but he was strong, alpha strong, and she was exhausted, barefoot, and weak from running. "You'll regret this," she whispered, voice trembling but defiant. "Kale, he will come for me." The rival alpha laughed, dark and mocking, twisting her arms slightly to remind her of his control. "Your king? He's far from here. And you're alone, little mate. Alone and worthless." Alicia's mind flashed again, back to the night she had spent alone in the orphanage, curled in the corner, whispering to herself that no one would ever want her, that love was a cruel joke. The memory, raw and vivid, fueled a spark inside her. She wasn't helpless. She had survived worse. She could survive this too. But before she could act, another sound cut through the night, a low, guttural growl, unlike anything human. Every hair on her body stood on end. The rival alpha stiffened, instinctively turning toward the sound, but Alicia froze, heart thundering. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged, moving with predatory grace. Golden eyes glowed in the crimson light, for shimmering as it caught the blood moon. Kale, but not as she had known him, stepped into the clearing. Wolf form, fully transformed, majestic, terrifying, ferocious. Alicia's pulse raced, relief and awe colliding in her chest. She opened her mouth, calling out to him, but he didn't recognize her. His growl deepened, rumbling from his chest, teeth bared as he lunged toward the rival alpha. His body, massive and powerful, collided with the enemy, sending him sprawling across the forest floor. Alicia stumbled back, eyes wide, chest heaving. "Kale," she cried, but he froze mid-motion, nostrils flaring, golden eyes scanning her as if she were another intruder. The connection she had felt, every touch, every heated moment, seemed lost to him in this form. He was the wolf first, the king second, and she was just another figure in the shadows. The rival alpha scrambled to his feet, attempting to flee, but Kale's wolf form was unmatched. He moved with blinding speed, claws and teeth striking with precision, protecting the territory as fiercely as he had protected her in human form. Alicia's mind spun with a mix of fear, longing, and awe. The man she loved was there, but not as she knew him. The golden eyes, the raw power, the dominance that was all him, yet alien, untethered, and terrifyingly untouchable. She tried to step closer, to reach out, but he growled again, a warning this time. It tore through her chest, a sound that was both a call to caution and a declaration of power. Her heart ached. She wanted him, needed him, and yet couldn't cross the barrier of his feral instincts. As the rival alpha finally scrambled out of reach, Alicia sank to her knees, breath ragged. The wolf, Kale, circulated the clearing, ensuring no threat remained, golden eyes piercing through the darkness. She realized then that survival meant patience, hiding, waiting for the human part of him to return. Until then, she had to endure the ache of distance, the hunger of desire, and the crushing knowledge that the man who had claimed her, kissed her, branded her heart, now did not recognize her at all. The blood moon continued its slow crawl across the sky, painting the forest in crimson. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound heightened, and Alicia shivered in the cold night air. She was hunted, yes, but not defeated. Fear had driven her here, but determination anchored her to the ground. She would survive. She would find him. She would remind the Alpha King of the bond they shared, one that even a wolf's feral instincts could not erase. Alicia's breath caught as Kale, wolf form towering and feral, stepped closer, golden eyes scanning her with unrecognizing intensity. She knew the danger wasn't over, and neither was the longing, the desire, the bond that burned between them, unbroken even in the shadow of the blood moon. The man she loved was gone, replaced by a beast who didn't remember her name. Alicia's breath came in ragged gasps as she crouched behind the twisted roots of an ancient tree, watching Kale, the man who had claimed her, the one who had branded her heart, move through the forest in wolf form. His fur glistened under the pale moonlight, golden eyes glinting with raw, untamed power. Every muscle in his massive frame rippled with lethal precision as he prowled, feral and unrecognizing, a predator stripped of all human tenderness. Fear clawed at her chest. He didn't see her. He didn't know her. The man she loved, the Alpha King whose golden gaze had burned through her every doubt, was gone, replaced by this beast whose instincts ruled above all else. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling, torn between awe, terror, and a longing she couldn't suppress. Every instinct screamed to run, but she couldn't. Not while he was lost, not while he was still the Kale she had loved, somewhere deep beneath the feral mask. "Kale," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Her words trembled, laden with desperation. "Kale, it's me, Alicia." The wolf froze, nostrils flaring, ears twitching. A low, threatening growl rolled from his chest as he glared at her, perceiving her not as a mate, but as an intruder in his territory. His teeth flashed in the moonlight, and for a horrifying heartbeat, Alicia believed he might attack. The forest seemed to hold its breath with her. Her hands shook, but she forced herself forward, every step deliberate, careful. She reached out slowly, her fingertips brushing the silken fur of his neck, warm and alive beneath her touch. She spoke his name again, softer this time, almost a prayer. "Kale, it's me. Please remember me." Golden eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of recognition dancing in the depths. His growl faltered, a shudder running through his massive frame as the human part of him clawed its way back through the beastly instinct. Slowly, painfully, the transformation began. Muscles contracted, fur receding, and the beast shrank back into the man she knew, shaking, vulnerable, but alive. Alicia fell to her knees beside him, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. Her hands rested on his trembling shoulders as he drew in ragged breaths, finally human again, yet still raw and feral from the shift. His golden eyes, softened now, searched hers, confusion and recognition warring in their depths. "Alicia," he murmured, voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "You're here." "I'm here," she sobbed, clinging to him. "I didn't leave. I couldn't." His hand, still trembling, cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed away a streak of tear and dirt as he stared at her, vulnerability etched into every line of his face. "You shouldn't have followed me," he said, voice thick with emotion, struggle, and awe. I couldn't protect you in this form. I might have hurt you." "You didn't," she whispered. "You're alive. That's all that matters." For a long moment, they clung to each other, the forest silent around them except for their ragged breathing. The bond between them, marked by fire, desire, and danger, had endured the chaos of the full moon, the feral instincts, and the night's terrors. It had not broken. And yet, even as relief flooded through her, Alicia knew the danger was far from over. The threat that had followed them from the courtyard, the political rivals, the rival Alpha, the assassination plots, still loomed. Their survival depended on returning to the court, where power, envy, and scandal waited like sharpened blades. When they finally emerged from the forest, dawn brushing the horizon with silver and rose, the castle loomed ahead, pristine and daunting. Alicia's hair was tangled, her dress torn, her body battered and bruised, but she carried Kale with her steady presence, the bond between them stronger than fear. As they approached the castle gates, however, the enemy queen was already waiting. Her expression was that of cold malice, lips curling into a cruel smile. "Well, if it isn't the infamous mate," she said loudly, so everyone in the courtyard could hear. "Returned from the forest, safe and sound. But tell me, can she bear children for our king?" A hush fell over the courtyard. Alicia's stomach dropped, the weight of every whispered insult from the past weeks pressing down on her. Murmurs of disbelief and judgment spread through the nobles like wildfire. The words infertile and barren cut sharper than any blade, and Alicia felt the familiar sting of shame rise to her cheeks. Kale's hands immediately shot to her shoulders, golden eyes blazing with fury. The protective alpha in him surged forward, every instinct screaming to defend, to strike, to annihilate the threat. He pressed himself slightly in front of her, as though his presence alone could shield her from the venomous words. "Enough," he growled, voice low and dangerous, vibrating through the marble courtyards. "Her body is hers, her heart is mine, and anyone who dares question her worth will answer to me." Alicia felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the raw power radiating from him. Even in the aftermath of the forest, the moonlit chaos, and the wolf transformation, he remained her protector, her alpha, her king. And she, barefoot, torn, and vulnerable, felt a surge of fierce love, trust, and defiance. The enemy queen's smile faltered, just a fraction, but her malice didn't waver. She knew her words had landed, and she would continue to exploit any crack in the armor, any doubt that lingered. Alicia's heart pounded as she realized the battlefield had shifted, from forest shadows to the gilded court, from survival to political warfare. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle move could become a weapon. Kale's hand tightened on hers, anchoring her to the present, reminding her that she was not alone, even in the face of cruelty and judgment. "We survive," he murmured, voice low, vibrating with unspoken promise. "We fight together. Always." Alicia nodded, leaning into him, drawing strength from his presence, from the fire and dominance that made her tremble, from the raw vulnerability that reminded her of the man beneath the beast. She would endure. She would fight. And she would reclaim her place, not just as his mate, but as a queen who could face scorn, envy, and malice without faltering. The enemy queen's gaze hardened, and with a voice that carried across the courtyard, she declared, "The mate of the Alpha King is barren. How can the kingdom survive if the queen cannot bear an heir?" Alicia's breath hitched. The court froze. Whispers rose like a tide. The next battle, of love, power, and survival, had only just begun. They called her barren. They called her worthless. But they didn't know who she truly was. The grand hall of the palace still reverberated with whispers and gasps from the enemy queen's shocking declaration. "The mate of the Alpha King is barren." Her voice had cut through the court like a knife, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The nobles, once adorned in polite smiles and hushed reverence, now exchanged glances, murmurs flowing like a dark river beneath the glittering chandeliers. Alicia stood frozen, fingers gripping the edges of her torn gown. Shame threatened to pull her to her knees. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, each whisper a blade. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows and never be seen again. Every memory of her childhood traumas, the orphanage nights, the relentless ridicule, the unending loneliness, rose up in vivid flashes, a bitter reminder that perhaps the world's cruelty had always been waiting for her. She nearly turned, every instinct urging her to flee. If she left, she could save Kale's throne, protect the kingdom from scandal. The thought of walking away, abandoning the very man who had claimed her, tore at her heart. But the stronger pull, the one that had tethered her to Kale from the very first touch, kept her rooted in place. Kale's golden gaze, piercing and unyielding, found hers across the hall. His presence was magnetic, commanding, almost suffocating in its intensity. He strode forward, each step measured, deliberate, drawing the attention of the nobles and the enemy queen alike. The murmurs dimmed as the Alpha King positioned himself directly in front of her, his broad shoulders shielding her, his golden eyes blazing with fire. He reached out, taking her hand firmly in his. The touch was electrifying, a jolt of power and possession that left her pulse racing and her knees weak. "Alicia," he said, voice steady yet deep, vibrating through the hall. "Do you wish to step aside for whispers and lies?" Alicia shook her head, though tears glistened in her eyes. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. And yet, she wanted more than anything to stand with him, to be the mate he had claimed, the queen he had chosen. Kale raised his hand, silencing the court with a subtle flick, his presence alone demanding attention. "Listen well," he continued, voice ringing out with unshakable authority. "I don't care if she can give me an heir. She is my mate. She is my queen. She is my life. Anyone who dares question her worth will answer to me." A collective gasp rippled through the court. Murmurs of shock, disbelief, and suppressed fear swept through the nobles. Eyes darted between Kale's imposing figure and Alicia's trembling form. For the first time, the whispers of ridicule seemed powerless, drowned beneath the weight of his devotion. Alicia's fingers curled around his, finding strength in his unyielding claim. She could feel the warmth, the power, the undeniable truth in his words. She was not worthless. She was not merely a mate, a pawn, or a tool for producing heirs. She was seen. She was chosen. And the knowledge ignited a fire inside her, a spark of courage that had never burned so brightly. The enemy queen's lips tightened in irritation, but she said nothing. She realized, at last, that the Alpha King's declaration was not empty. No amount of scandal, no words of betrayal, could undermine the bond between Kale and Alicia. The court had been silenced by the sheer force of his devotion, and in that silence, Alicia felt a sense of empowerment she had never known. Yet, just as the tension in the hall seemed to settle, a hush fell over everyone, this time different, heavier. An ancient seer, a cloaked figure who had remained at the back of the hall, stepped forward. Her eyes were dark and knowing, her presence commanding respect despite her frail frame. The courtiers instinctively parted, leaving a clear path as she approached the center. "Alpha King Kale," she began, voice low but carrying an eerie weight, "and Alicia, mate of the Alpha, I bring news that may change the course of your path." Kale's hand tightened around Alicia's, his golden gaze shifting to the seer with cautious intensity. Alicia felt a tremor run through her, both fear and anticipation intertwining. The seer lifted her gnarled hands, pointing toward Alicia. "The mate of the Alpha, deemed barren by the tongues of envy and malice, is not beyond hope. The prophecy speaks thus: her infertility is not permanent. Through the trials of blood, fire, and love, the gift that was withheld may yet bloom." A ripple ran through the hall, a mixture of awe and disbelief. Alicia's heart raced, her chest tightening with hope, fear, and something else she hadn't felt in years: possibility. The notion that she could be more than what the world had whispered, more than what she had been forced to believe, made her knees weak. She could hear her own breathing, hear the life that pulsed through her, and for the first time, it seemed like it belonged to her entirely. Kale's golden eyes softened as he turned to her, the feral fire still present but tempered with something deeper: tenderness, protection, and unshakable devotion. "Do you hear that, Alicia?" he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You are not defined by their words. You are not defined by what they say you cannot do. You are mine, and I will fight for you always." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time they were not shame or fear. They were a release, a cleansing, a baptism into a life where she was truly seen, truly valued. She leaned into him, feeling the strength of his presence, the steady warmth of his body, and the certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The enemy queen's gaze was a dagger, but it no longer held power over her. Alicia lifted her chin, meeting the court's eyes with newfound confidence. The whispers of ridicule and doubt were still there, but now, they were insignificant. She was unbroken. She had survived danger, betrayal, and scandal, and she would endure anything for the man who had claimed her heart and soul. Cale's hand slid to the small of her back, drawing her closer, a silent promise in every touch. Together, they stood at the center of the hall, a united front against envy, politics, and fear. Their bond was undeniable, their love fierce, and their power, both emotional and political, was now impossible to ignore. The seer's eyes lingered on Alicia for a moment longer, the weight of prophecy heavy upon her frail shoulders. "Prepare yourselves," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the hall's lingering murmurs. "The path will be perilous, but hope is not lost. The mate of the Alpha King may yet fulfill her destiny." As the seer withdrew, leaving a charged silence in her wake, Alicia felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The prophecy was a promise, a warning, and a challenge all at once. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to embrace it. Cale pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, whispering, "Whatever comes, we face it together. You are my mate, my queen, my life. Nothing will break that." Alicia's hands trembled, but she squeezed his in return, a silent vow that she would never abandon him, no matter the trials, no matter the dangers, no matter the whispers of a cruel world. She was shamed, yes, but she was unbroken. And she would rise. The court still buzzed with tension, but the prophecy hung over Alicia like a sword and a promise. Her infertility might not be permanent. The enemy queen's smile faded, realizing that her attempts to humiliate and weaken Alicia had only awakened a fire that could not be extinguished. She was sold like a pawn but rose as a queen. The dawn broke over the kingdom with a muted silver glow, illuminating the grand palace in a gentle light that belied the storm of battles and trials that had raged within its walls. Alicia stood at the balcony, her gaze sweeping over the courtyard where the remnants of chaos still lingered, the scattered remnants of rival factions, the scattered guards, and the courtiers who had once whispered cruelly, now staring in awe at the figure she had become. Cale was beside her, regal and powerful, though his golden eyes held the faint traces of exhaustion from the trials they had endured together. The curse that had haunted him for so long, the darkness that had made his wolf side unstable, had not yet been fully broken, but tonight, with Alicia by his side, the final piece could fall into place. Alicia's heart thrummed in her chest, not with fear, but with determination. She knew what had to be done. Her love for Cale was fierce, unyielding, and pure. It had been tested by lies, threats, and betrayal, but it had endured. The prophecy had whispered hope into her soul, and now, as she placed her hands over his, she channeled everything she had, her courage, her longing, her devotion, into the ritual of breaking his curse. "Cale," she whispered, voice steady despite the tremor in her heart, "I'm here. I'm with you. You don't have to fight alone." His eyes softened at her words, vulnerability flashing through the gold as he cupped her face. "Alicia, you're incredible. You've endured so much and still, you choose to stay with me." "I stay because I love you," she said simply, yet with the conviction of 1,000 storms. "I stay because I believe in us. Because I believe in you." The air around them seemed to thrum, the golden glow in Cale's eyes deepening, as if the very universe recognized the power of their bond. Alicia pressed closer, her forehead resting against his, breath mingling with his. She whispered words of encouragement, words of promise, words of love that surged into him like fire. And then it happened. A shiver ran through Cale's body, his form wavered, golden fur flickering as the curse fought its last desperate resistance. He trembled, leaning heavily on her, and Alicia wrapped her arms around him, holding him steady, grounding him with her presence. The world seemed to hold its breath as the darkness recoiled, the shadows retreating before the power of their combined strength, love, trust, and courage intertwined. With a final, guttural growl that transformed into a human cry, Kale's body shifted completely. The wolf was gone, replaced fully by the alpha king she loved. His eyes, brilliant and unbroken, met hers, and a laugh of relief escaped him. Raw, vulnerable, and utterly human. "You did it," he whispered, voice hoarse but elated, pressing his forehead to hers. "You saved me. You saved us." Alicia smiled through her tears, clutching him tightly. "We saved each other," she murmured. "Always." But their trials were not yet fully over. Beyond the palace walls, the remnants of their enemies, those who had sought to humiliate, undermine, and destroy them, still lingered. The rival alphas, the enemy queen, and the courtiers who had plotted in whispers had gathered their forces for one final assault. The palace echoed with a clamor of preparation for war. Kale's golden gaze sharpened, regal and commanding. "Then let us end this," he said, voice low but lethal. "Once and for all." Alicia nodded, standing taller than she ever had before. She had learned to fight, not just physically, but with her courage, her mind, and her unwavering heart. Together, they moved through the palace corridors, side by side, the bond between them radiating authority and power. Guards, loyal and steadfast, followed their alpha king and queen, ready to defend them against any threat. The battle was fierce. Rivals attempted to breach the throne room, but they underestimated the unity and strength of Kale and Alicia. With every step, every command, every strike, they dismantled the opposition, their enemies falling not just to brute force, but to the unyielding synergy of their connection. Alicia's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from exhilaration and the undeniable thrill of standing beside the man she loved, fighting as his equal, as his mate, as his queen. Finally, the enemy queen herself was brought to her knees, cornered and powerless. Her eyes, once sharp with malice, now reflected shock and defeat. Kale's voice cut through the hall, unwavering and commanding. "You will not harm this kingdom. You will not harm her. And your schemes end here." The woman's defiance crumbled, and silence fell. Alicia felt the weight of triumph settle on her shoulders. Not a triumph of cruelty or vengeance, but of love, courage, and survival. She had been sold, mocked, and shamed, yet she now stood as the woman who had faced every trial and emerged victorious. Kale turned to her, golden eyes blazing with pride and affection. "Alicia, it is time." Time for what? She wondered, heart fluttering. And then she saw the ornate crown, gleaming under the grand chandeliers, held out for her. With steady hands, Kale lifted the crown and placed it upon her head. It was heavy, yes, but it felt right, like it had been made for her, shaped by the fires of trials, devotion, and love. Alicia's heart swelled, and she reached for Kale, drawing him close. He pressed his lips to hers, fierce, passionate, and claiming, yet tender in a way that spoke of vulnerability and profound love. She melted into him, feeling the culmination of everything they had endured, every danger, every whisper, every fear, all dissolve into this moment. They pulled back just slightly, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling. Golden eyes met tear-filled brown ones, and in that gaze was a promise. "Together," Kale whispered. "Always." "Forever," Alicia replied, her voice resolute, unwavering. The kingdom watched in awe as the Alpha King and his queen stood united, unbroken, unstoppable, and inseparable. Every enemy defeated, every threat neutralized, every doubt silenced. From the shadows of betrayal to the light of triumph, Alicia had risen, not just as Kale's mate, but as a queen who would rule with courage, wisdom, and love. The throne was theirs, not through birthright, not through manipulation, but through the unshakable bond of two hearts that had fought, endured, and claimed destiny together. And in the quiet aftermath, as the sun rose fully over the kingdom, spilling golden light into the grand hall, Kale and Alicia stood side by side, hands entwined, hearts united, and eyes on the future. The palace, the court, the people, all bore witness to their reign, a reign of strength, love, and unbreakable unity. She had been sold, humiliated, hunted, and doubted, but she had risen. She was no longer a pawn. She was a queen. And the man who had claimed her heart, her soul, and her life stood beside her, ready to rule as her king, protector, and mate forever.